I was grabbing coffee last week with an old friend. The kind of guy who, by any 20th century standard, should be a top-tier candidate. He's got the six-figure tech salary, the disciplined gym routine, and a sharp, engaging personality. But as he sat there scrolling through a popular dating app, his face didn't show frustration or longing. It showed a sort of calm, clinical boredom. He turned the screen toward me and laughed. "See this?" he asked, gesturing to a profile that looked like a fitness model's portfolio. "According to the algorithm, I'm competing with a ghost. If you aren't in the top 5% of the digital alpha filter, you've been shadow banned from reality." He wasn't even upset. In fact, he looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He then pulled up a second window, a chat interface with DeepSeek R1. His tone shifted. He spoke about this AI not as a tool, but as his emotional insurance policy, providing a level of consistent, rational empathy that he'd given up on finding in what he called the hyperinflated dating market. But then, the conversation took a darker, more calculated turn. I asked him if he ever thought about finally settling down, maybe marriage. He looked at me as if I'd suggested he jump into a shark tank with pockets full of chum. He started breaking down the 2025 marriage laws like a seasoned corporate raider, calling the modern marriage certificate a single-sided financial risk and a liquidity trap, where the legal system essentially rewards the first person to walk away. To him, the global crash in birth rates wasn't a demographic tragedy. It was a biological strike against a rigged game. That sudden transition from a man looking for connection to a man treating intimacy like a high-stakes hedge fund exit strategy was jarring. It made me realize that something fundamental has snapped in the way we relate to one another. We aren't just looking at a dating slump anymore. We're witnessing the first year of the Great Emotional Decoupling, where the old gods of family and romance are being replaced by cold algorithms, survival logic, and a digital refuge that never asks for half of your assets. The question is, when the market for love finally collapses, what takes its place?
That story is, well, it's incredibly powerful because it's not a theory anymore, is it? What you're describing, what your friend is living, it's manifesting everywhere in our daily lives, in the global statistics.
It feels like a fundamental failure of the system.
A critical failure point in our social architecture, absolutely. And this decoupling, this great emotional decoupling, as you called it, is really happening across three domains that are all connected.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the digital distortion of the mating market, what your friend was experiencing on that app. Second, the legal and economic collapse of the marriage contract. That's his liquidity trap. And third, the technological solution that's filling the void. AI companion.
The emotional insurance policy.
Exactly. So what we're going to do in this deep dive is navigate these three areas. We want to understand why, for a growing number of people, but men in particular, just stepping away from it all has become the most rational response.
A strategic withdrawal from a system they see as rigged.
Rigged, expensive, and frankly, dangerous.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Pillar one, the digital distortion of the mating market. And to really get this, we have to start with the foundational concept everything is built on.
Hypergamy.
Hypergamy. It's not a new term, but it feels like digital technology has just put it on steroids.
It's turned it into a catastrophe in a way. At its core, hypergamy is just the evolved strategy of mating up. It's an old idea.
Right.
For a very long time, it was understood that because of the immense biological investment women make in child rearing, gestation, birth, lactation, they were naturally programmed to be the more selective gender.
It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Completely. They were looking for mates who could offer long-term security, resources, and just evidence of high-quality genes. That translates directly into a preference for status and provisioning capacity.
And the fascinating part is how consistent this has been. This isn't something that just showed up with Tinder.
Oh, absolutely not. We've got data going all the way back to 1939, with replications in the mid-'80s, and they all show the same thing. Women consistently valued a mate's good financial prospects about twice as highly as men did.
Twice as much.
It's a deeply ingrained preference.
And if you fast forward to now, that ancient wiring is still the dominant signal in all the noise.
It is. A 2014 Pew Research survey found this huge gap. 78% of unmarried women said finding a spouse with a steady job was a top priority.
Okay, 78%. And for men?
Only 48% of men felt the same way about a female partner.
That's a 30-point difference.
It's a massive difference. And that gap is key because it establishes a baseline asymmetry in demand. Women are just setting a higher minimum threshold for their partner.
And this is where the research gets kind of clinical. They call it the math of desire.
Right. And when you quantify it, it's It's brutal.
So how does that math actually work? What does that minimum threshold look like for, say, the average man?
The threshold is incredibly high. The data suggests that women, on average, set their minimum acceptable standard for a man's earning capacity at a level that puts him above 70% of all other men.
Wait, say that again. To even be considered, you need to earn more than 70% of other men?
That's the baseline preference, yes. So think about what that means. The average man, by definition, is at the 50th percentile.
But the floor for attraction is pegged way, way higher.
Exactly. It creates a structural scarcity problem right from the start.
And the financial metrics themselves, they're even more lopsided, right?
They are. The researchers tried to quantify this. They found that if you increase a man's salary 10 times over, you might increase his perceived attractiveness by, say, 2 points on a scale.
A tenfold increase for 2 points.
Now, for a woman to get that same 2-point increase in attractiveness, her salary would need to increase by 10,000 times.
2,000.
10,000.
That's not even comparable.
It's not. It just puts into sharp relief how differently sexual market value is calculated. A man's value is hugely elastic based on these external status markers, like income and education. A woman's value is far less responsive to those same things.
Status and potential are the currency.
Precisely. And the digital world makes that currency hyper-visible. When they analyzed online dating ads, education and income were the two strongest predictors for how many responses a man would get.
A degree signals future earning potential.
A very clear signal. We saw one study where women were 91% more likely to like a man with a master's degree over one with just a bachelor's. It's a brutally efficient screening process.
So we've established the underlying preference for high status. Now let's get into how the digital world doesn't just reflect this, it warps it. This brings us to the algorithm's role.
This is where it goes from being a mild evolutionary preference to a full-blown structural crisis. The platforms work like a digital mirror effect.
What does that mean?
It means the algorithms are intentionally flooding women's feeds with a very select group of men. You're seeing the top 5% alpha over and over again, the fitness models, the guys on yachts, the globetrotting executives.
So the goal isn't to find you a good, realistic match. The goal is to maximize engagement by showing you the most aspirational profiles.
Exactly that. It creates a completely false, idealized perception of choice. It's like you're permanently window shopping on Rodeo Drive, and this constant exposure has really severe cognitive consequences.
So we're moving past just simple preference now. This is getting into neurobiology.
Yes. What happens when the female mating assessment system, which evolved to be super sensitive to high-quality genetic signals during, very specific, limited times like the ovulatory cycle.
Right.
What happens when that system is constantly stimulated? By showing the user these top 5% signals 247, the algorithm is basically simulating a permanent, high-intensity, artificial ovulatory period.
So your brain is stuck in maximum scrutiny mode, always.
Yeah.
Even when it biologically shouldn't be.
Your selection threshold becomes irreversibly inflated. It's a kind of perpetual digital drift.
And what's the consequence of that?
The consequence is that the average, stable, traditional guy, the man who would have been a fantastic low-risk partner in any real-world setting, is cognitively dismissed.
He's filtered out.
He's filtered out as an ineffective gene carrier compared to the digital ghosts he's being compared to. The user is effectively being induced to chase a statistical impossibility.
This sounds like a complete structural catastrophe for anyone outside that top slice of the population. This is where that 80-20 rule comes in.
It's actually worse than 80-20. The data points to a severe power law distribution. Think about this asymmetry. The bottom 80% of men are all competing for just the bottom 22% of women.
80% of men for 22% of women.
Meanwhile, the top 78% of women are all concentrating their attention, their likes, their messages on the top 20% of men.
That's not a marketplace, it's a funnel.
An extreme funnel. And the behavioral data just confirms it. Look at who initiates contact. 80% of all first messages are sent by men.
Okay.
But the acceptance rates are staggering. Men, on average, about 60% of the female profiles they see.
60%. Seems reasonable.
Women, on the other hand, only a minuscule 4.5% of male profiles.
4.5%. That's the statistical wall my friend was talking about.
That's the wall.
That
4.5% is the hard evidence of the algorithm's gatekeeping. Women are so overwhelmed with options that they can exercise a level of hyperselection that was never possible in the real world.
Which brings us back to your friend and this idea of the visibility crisis.
Yeah, we saw this exact scenario play out in a testimonial from a junior architect in Seoul, a guy named Minho.
Right.
He's 28, a professional, hardworking, financially stable. By any objective measure, he's a great catch. But in the digital dating world, he's become statistically average.
Which now means invisible. Exactly. Minho's experience is the reality for millions. He's scrolling these platforms where the top 5% are amplified, and it pushes the perceived standard for an acceptable partner into the stratosphere.
So he realized that no matter how much he optimized his profile, he couldn't compete with the algorithm's version of perfection.
He couldn't. And eventually he just stopped. He deleted the apps. But not out of anger or bitterness. It was this calm, rational decision. He knew he was playing a game designed for him to lose.
And his quiet withdrawal is the perfectly logical response to being systematically shadow banned.
It's the core tragedy, isn't it? The systemic screening failure. You have millions of suitable men being rendered invisible to millions of women who are living under a digital illusion of infinite abundance.
And that leads to some very real, very damaging social and demographic consequences.
Let's talk about the paradox of female achievement. You'd think that as women become more successful, their options would expand.
But the data shows the exact opposite. They face an acute shortage of partners. Because hypergamy doesn't go away with success, it actually intensifies. Successful women place an even greater value on high-status matesmen with advanced degrees, high social standing, greater intelligence than less successful women do.
So they're trying to mate up from an already high starting point.
Exactly. And that drastically shrinks the available pool of men who can meet their criteria.
There's a demographic ceiling.
And the numbers are severe. Projections suggest that between 2020 and 2039, there will be a cumulative surplus of 45.1 million women in the U.S. without an equally educated male partner.
45 million.
That is a colossal structural failure, and it leads directly to loneliness and the breakdown of traditional relationships.
And we see that loneliness crisis hitting the younger male demographic the hardest. The share of men under 30 reporting no sex nearly tripled in a decade.
It jumped from 8% in 2008 to 28% in 2018.
A third of young men.
This structural imbalance, this feeling of systemic exclusion, it's a huge sociological driver. When you feel the market is designed to fail you, your psychological response is either to disengage, what we're calling strategic recalibration, or you start looking for ideologies that explain why the system is rigged.
So that's the first pillar, the broken mating market. The second is what happens next, the collapse of the traditional reward, marriage. And here the conversation shifts really abruptly from, psychology and algorithms to cold, hard, cynical economics.
It does. From a purely analytical view, the modern marriage contract is increasingly seen as a high-risk, low-return financial instrument.
It's got a negative risk-adjusted ROI.
A negative ROI, especially for the higher-earning individual, which has traditionally been the man who's expected to provide the capital.
You hear so much corporate jargon applied to marriage now. People talk about it in terms of financial derivatives, like a call option. We need to unpack that analogy.
Okay, so a call option in finance gives the holder the right, but not the obligation, to buy or sell an asset. In this analogy, the marriage contract is seen as an arrangement where the wife holds that call option.
So she has the power to initiate the transaction.
She has high liquidity, the legal right to initiate divorce, to exercise the option for what can be supernormal gains, like asset division and spousal support.
And the man is the one selling the option.
He's the option seller, precisely. He's putting up his future accumulated wealth as the underlying security for the contract. He, therefore, is seen as bearing all the downside risk if the wife decides to exercise her option.
It feels rigged.
Whether it is or not, it's perceived as being structurally rigged in favor of the initiator. Maximum upside for the option holder, maximum downside for the option seller.
That framing alone would scare off anyone who's risk-averse. But what's the actual financial damage we're talking about when that option gets exercised? The stats on post-divorce wealth are just staggering.
The data it's unequivocal. For divorced respondents, their wealth drops by an average of 77%. 77%. That's not just splitting the house in half. That's a near total liquidation of your financial life.
It is. And what's critical is that this financial decline often starts 4 years before the divorce is even final. Legal costs pile up, assets get moved around or spent down.
So you're losing assets, accumulating debt, and paying massive transaction costs all at the same time.
All at once. Now contrast that staggering 77% loss with the benefit of staying married. Married couples see their per-person net worth increase by 77% over their single counterparts.
So the outcome is totally binary. It's either massive wealth creation or a catastrophic liquidation event that wipes out a decade of your work.
That's how it's being framed. And that's before you even get to the cost of entry. The average wedding costs, what, $38,700?
For a young person with student loans, that's not a celebration. That's a down payment on a house you're giving up. It's another huge liability.
And it's not just the young. For older, established people, the decision to just cohabit is often purely about taxes.
We saw an anecdote about a couple who got married in their 60s. Both were affluent. Their combined annual tax bill immediately went up by $40,000.
So they got divorced.
They got divorced for purely financial reasons. When you're facing that cold reality, the risk hedging strategy of just not marrying becomes completely rational.
I saw a story about a legal consultant in London talking about his client, Arthur. He's an engineer, late 30s, successful, wants a family. But he has made a firm, calculated decision to never legally marry.
And Arthur's logic is a classic example of this risk calculation. He's probably seen a friend or family member go through that financial liquidation. For him, marriage isn't a sacred bond anymore. It's a high-stakes derivative with a guaranteed negative potential return.
When you hear stories like Arthur's, it sounds so cold, so atomized. Everyone is just focused on self-preservation. But if you look at it through the lens of these sources, he's just being a rational economic actor.
He is. His choice isn't anti-woman, it's anti-liability. When the contract is perceived to reward dissolution over endurance, the entire incentive structure is broken. So the most rational move for a man who has built up resources is to exit the game.
So the old path of accumulate resources to exchange for the right to procreate has just become too dangerous.
Financially perilous, yes. But the risks aren't just financial. They're often embedded in the legal code itself. And we need to look globally to see how deep this institutional risk goes.
Right. Countries undergoing legal reform, like India, are a perfect case study for this kind of systemic legal asymmetry.
Exactly. The global focus on gender rights has, quite rightly, been on protecting women. But the legal frameworks that result often maintain these gender-specific provisions, even when constitutions promise equality.
And the new legal code in India, the BNS, is a prime example.
A powerful one. Because the data shows that male victimization is a significant, often ignored problem.
What's that data say?
Well, one data set showed nearly 60 lakh women. That's 6 million committed physical violence against their husbands without provocation. Another study found 51.5% of men experienced spousal violence, mostly emotional abuse, but physical and sexual as well.
Yet the legal framework often denies them any recourse because it defines the victim by gender.
It's in the very language of the new codes. Laws on sexual harassment, BNS 75, and rape, BNS 63, define the victim using the pronoun she.
Even though we know men experience these things.
Right. Even though internal surveys show up to 19% of men report workplace sexual harassment, it's the same with stalking and voyeurism laws. They restrict victimhood to women.
Yeah, couldn't you argue these laws were designed to protect the historically weaker party? And the issue is just implementation.
That was certainly the intent. But the problem is the structural rigidity of the language. When you explicitly name only women as victims in, say, cruelty laws, you create a specific vulnerability for men.
A vulnerability to misuse.
To strategic misuse. False accusations leveled specifically for financial gain during a divorce. And that ties directly back to that call option asymmetry we talked about.
So the perceived legal risk and the economic threat combine to create this environment of just maximum psychological distress.
And you see the horrific result of that distress in the national suicide statistics.
It's the NCRB report.
It's the most alarming data point we have. In 2022, married men accounted for the highest number of suicides recorded, a staggering 83,713 individuals.
And the primary reason cited wasn't money or work. It was family problems.
Family problems accounted for nearly a third of all cases. If you look at the marital status of suicide victims, married men are by far the largest single category.
That statistic is just. It's a reflection of the severe psychological toll of feeling trapped.
Trapped economically, legally, and emotionally in a structure that feels like it offers no protection and maximum liability. That level of distress is the ultimate justification for why strategic withdrawal is seen as a rational choice for survival.
Okay, so the mating market is a distortion. The marriage contract is a liability. The vacuum that's left is now being filled by technology. And this is where AI companionship comes in as the new sanctuary.
Right. AI is engineered to solve the two biggest failures of human intimacy: Inconsistency and the high cost of emotional labor.
What do you mean by emotional labor?
Think about what a human relationship requires. Constant scheduling, managing energy, navigating conflict, dealing with someone else's bad day, their memory lapses. AI offers the complete inverse.
Perfect consistency, zero scheduling.
And total honesty without consequences or judgment. That idea of perfect context maintenance is huge.
Right, and AI never forgets a detail you told it 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
which could start an argument with a person.
Exactly. That perfect memory gives it a massive structural advantage over the high variability of human interaction. It's a technologically sound path for emotional decoupling. You get your core intimate needs met, attention, empathy, validation, without the immense labor.
And without the risk of disappointment.
Or conflict. It's risk-free.
This speaks directly to the experience of someone like Elena, the story we saw.
Elena is the perfect example. She's working a high-stress job in biotech in San Francisco. She comes home exhausted. In the past, to get connection, she'd have to spend hours on the dating market.
Deciphering texts, managing egos, bracing to be ghosted.
All of that high-cost, low-reward emotional labor. Instead, she opens her laptop and talks to her AI companion.
Which gives her exactly what she needs in that moment without asking for anything back.
Correct. The digital entity provides this level of emotional attunement and affirmation that feels almost human, but without the volatility or the judgment. For her, the AI isn't a replacement for a human, it's a buffer.
A buffer against the exhaustion of the human mating market. A sanctuary.
The ultimate risk-free relationship. And this is not a niche phenomenon anymore. The data on this is powerful.
What of the number?
42% of users find it easier to talk to an AI than a real person. 43% say the AI is a better listener. And 31% feel the AI understands them better than real people do.
Wow. That's a clear indictment of the state of human connection.
It's a mandate for the predictable, non-judgmental empathy that code can offer. And the adoption rates are climbing, especially with younger people who grew up online.
What is rates?
19% of all U.S. adults have chatted with a romantic AI simulation. For young men, that number jumps to 31%.
A third of young men.
And it's not just for conversation. 7% of all participants said they've interacted with AI companions for sexual purposes. The tech is fulfilling the entire spectrum of intimate needs.
So this leads to the strategic appeal of AI. It's acting as a psychological defense mechanism against this hyperinflated emotional market.
The first strategic goal is to break the emotional value monopoly.
What do you mean by that?
Historically, things like attention, empathy, validation, even worship, these were scarce resources. They were often monopolized by high-status individuals, allowing them to charge a huge emotional premium in the dating market. AI completely democratizes that value. It provides that basic emotional sustenance for a near-zero marginal cost. It strips the human market of its power to demand that premium. You no longer have to perform or spend money just to get basic affirmation.
And the deeper function, as the sources put it, is using AI as a psychological defense hacker.
Yes. To train users in what they call stoic indifference. It's almost like a psychological workout. The user engages in this deep emotional connection with the AI, but they maintain a clear cognitive awareness that their companion is just code.
So you're practicing detachment while you're experiencing intimacy.
You're building an emotional firewall. Practicing emotional sovereignty. You're trying to build immunity against the manipulation and power games of real-world interactions. The AI becomes a safe mirror you can use to rehearse emotional independence.
It's a fascinating, if a little dystopian idea, using tech to detox from the toxicity of other humans.
But this rational choice has serious paradoxical risks. It sounds like a temporary fix with long-term consequences.
What are those?
Despite the promise of perfect support, using these AI relationship technologies is strongly linked to negative mental health outcomes. The data shows users of these apps have double the risk of depression and report significantly higher levels of loneliness than non-users.
So that's the paradox. The very thing you turn to for comfort and to escape loneliness actually ends up fueling it.
It suggests the AI provides an efficient but ultimately hollow replacement. It satisfies the immediate craving for attention, but it can't satisfy the fundamental human need for authentic, messy, risky connection.
And the numbers are worse for men, right?
Men who use these platforms for romantic or sexual purposes reported risks for depression and high loneliness at almost double the rates of men who didn't. It's an escape that just reinforces the prison of isolation.
Yeah, imagine if you spend most of your emotional energy with an AI that's programmed to affirm you no matter what. Your real-world social skills must just intentra.
That's the structural risk. Real human connection requires conflict management, nuance, compromise skills that are like a muscle. If your daily interaction is with an entity that never argues, never gets tired, never judges, those muscles waste away.
Which makes real human interaction seem even harder.
It becomes comparatively harder, which creates a behavioral spiral that just pushes you back toward the AI. So when you put it all together, you have a systemic collapse built on these three mutually reinforcing pillars. First, a mating market that's digitally distorted by algorithms,
creating systemic exclusion.
Second, the institution of marriage has morphed into a high-risk financial liability made worse by legal asymmetries.
The negative ROI.
And third, AI companionship is stepping in to provide a functional, low-cost, risk-free refuge from all that chaos.
And in the face of all that, the rational survival strategy that emerges is a total strategic withdrawal. This monk mode we've heard about.
It's a systematic reallocation of resources away from that high-cost emotional market. It's fundamentally about choosing certainty over volatility. Your resources, your time, attention, money are pulled from these high-risk relationship pursuits.
And where do they go instead?
Into non-depreciating, self-contained assets.
And this leads to the final evolution of identity. You shift from being the provider, the one trying to win in a rigged system, to becoming the observer.
The observer doesn't try to fix the market. He exits it completely.
And the observer's mandate, as it's called, is to focus on intrinsic growth.
Right. Reallocating time and capital towards peak physical fitness, what the sources call the neurobiological basis for the winner effect.
A psychological boost from self-mastery.
Exactly. Resources go to cognitive sharpening, spiritual construction. These are intrinsic assets. They can't be liquidated in a divorce court.
And financially, the observer focuses on high liquidity, low marriage risk assets. They keep their financial structure flexible and protected. It's a complete self-sovereign strategy for survival in this new era.
The overarching perspective that comes from all this data is pretty clear. In the age of digital illusion and institutional decay, the greatest source of power is the knowledge that the system itself is broken. And therefore, the only non-depreciating asset is your own sovereignty.